Imagine that today you woke up as a citizen of Burundi. You don't know what year it is, and you've never had a watch to figure out what time it is. You've never heard of other countries like the USA or China, and you've never had internet or a phone. Not that you need a phone, because you don't know how to read or write either, just like almost everyone else in your country. This is Burundi, where hunger and poverty rule the game. It's an African country you wouldn't want to end up in, and this is the story, literally, of the poorest and most miserable country in the world, where death by hunger is unfortunately an everyday thing. The healthcare system is a disaster too. There are literally only a couple hundred doctors for 11 million people. But how did it happen that a country rich in resources lives below the poverty line? Why does a family with many children survive on 30 cents a day? And the weirdest part, why is Russia paying this state massive amounts of money? One of the consequences of the war in Ukraine is the unbelievable spike in nickel prices. The price per ton reached up to $50,000. And considering that Burundi holds colossal reserves of nickel, it might seem like these starving souls should have hit the jackpot times 10. But they didn't get rich, because Burundi doesn't even have electricity to mine nickel in any meaningful volume. You can easily see the electricity problem for yourself if you ever decide to visit. You see, even in the country's biggest airport, the power supply is unstable. And since planes can't land at an unpowered airport, pilots have no choice but to circle in the air, waiting for the next electricity window. But if the airport sometimes has electricity, then the regular citizens have none at all. On this website, you can see nighttime satellite images from space. Right now on screen, you're seeing nighttime satellite images of the USA. Well, okay, let's not compare a superpower to Burundi. Let's take, say, Nigeria, and now look at Burundi. It's literally an entire country blacked out. I bet many of you have heard the phrase Hakuna Matata in the famous cartoon The Lion King.
Hakuna Matata. What a wonderful phrase.
Which in Swahili means just don't worry and everything will be fine. This kind of problem-free philosophy. And you know what? It seems Burundi took that phrase a bit too seriously and doesn't want to worry about any problems at all. And why not? There's very clean air here. The weather is always just perfect. Basically just live and enjoy what God gave. Grow some fruits and breathe fresh air. And sure, you won't be having dinner in fancy restaurants, but at least you'll be happy. Hakuna Matata, right? But in fact, it's not Hakuna Matata at all, because according to WHO data, in 2018, it was Burundi citizens who were recognized as the most unhappy people on the planet. I won't go into whether happiness is in money, but I think this list shows that being poor and happy at the same time is quite difficult, because Hakuna Matata is not just about a free life, but also, for example, about health. But what kind of health can we talk about in Burundi if childbirth happens on the street? Here, it's normal to give birth on all fours or on your side. Doctors are not allowed near women. It's considered a bad sign and may attract evil spirits, so the woman does everything herself. At the end of the process, she bites through the umbilical cord with her teeth. Interestingly, even with shockingly high child mortality rates, the population of the country is growing at a fast pace. The country's population has almost doubled compared to the year 2000.
But how does that happen?
You see, with zero sex education and no access to contraceptives, a Burundian family gives birth to anywhere from 6 to 24 children, creating a reserve. Because when a third of children die, you still have many left. And here, adults die no less often than children. This is the WHO list that shows the top causes of death in this country. And here we can see malnutrition. Overall, the overwhelming majority of the population is chronically undernourished. People literally collapse from hunger, fainting right on the street. It's the kind of situation that makes you really want to help. But the president of Burundi believes, let them starve. The state has more important budget priorities.
Data shows that on a national level, treating malnutrition costs $102 million per year. This amount could be invested into other sectors that would contribute to economic growth and the sustainable development of our country.
Back to the WHO list. What struck me was that even though almost no one in Burundi can afford a personal vehicle, traffic accidents still take 7th place on the list. For comparison, in the US, where there are 500 times more cars, traffic accidents don't even make it into the top 10.
So how are Burundians who don't even have personal vehicles dying in crashes by the dozen?
This man's name is Eric, and he transports bananas by bicycle. Bananas that will later be used to make banana beer, so his fellow citizens can drink and briefly forget about their hard lives. But Eric has a problem. To earn anything, he has to load his old rusty bicycle to the very limit, and under those conditions, steering becomes a serious issue. But there's another problem. The bike becomes too heavy, so in order to reach the delivery point, Eric latches onto the back of the nearest truck. There are hardly any paved roads in the country, and that's exactly why if the driver stops suddenly in front of a pothole, or just swerves around it, Eric's life will immediately come to an end.
I think cyclists really should stop grabbing onto our trucks. Too many accidents happen because of it.
At the same time, there are even local traffic police here, but they don't help at all because they're just as untrained as they are corrupt. That's why Eric's future is always, essentially, hanging by a thread. On the other hand, even if couriers didn't cling to trucks, the risk to life would still be enormous. The fact is, the courier's cargo, about a couple hundred kilograms, is way too heavy for a bicycle. And when going downhill, the brake often fails. Couriers crash by the dozens into the nearest ravine. They die so often that even local women aren't eager to marry them because everyone here knows that couriers don't live long. Together with his girlfriend, Eric lives in a small house right by the road to Bujumbura. They still don't have children. They want to wait until Eric finds a less dangerous job. Yeah, this isn't DoorDash in a cozy car. Anyway, the job is truly brutal, but at least it pays well. By local standards anyway, couriers here earn a whole $10 a month. Almost no one here makes more than that. By local standards, that's considered a great Burundian salary. And at the same time, store prices here are even higher than in Mexico. Here, for example, a small can of Red Bull costs $3, which means Eric will be able to buy it after a whole week of life-threatening work. The currency of Burundi itself, the Burundian franc, is so absolutely worthless that if you buy it at a bank, you won't even be able to exchange it back. Not even in that same bank. I could keep piling it on forever, but you already get the point. These people are really suffering. Simply put, Burundi is the embodiment of a poor African agrarian homeless state.
But how did it end up this way? And more importantly, could it have gone differently?
There is an answer to that, and to find it, we need to look at a country that's right nearby. This is Rwanda, Burundi's twin brother, and it's home to the exact same kind of people. But here, hunger isn't even a problem. Meet Paul Kagame. He's been in power for 20 years without interruption, and in that time, he completely transformed the country. He didn't just eliminate hunger, he got rid of corruption too. What Kagame did with Rwanda is often called an economic miracle, but I think that miracle is easy to explain. The president of Rwanda announced zero tolerance for lawbreaking, jailed all the corrupt officials, cut unnecessary bureaucrats, and lowered taxes for businesses. And just look at what they achieved. The leader of Rwanda has definitely earned his applause. Because it's politicians like Paul Kagame who clearly show us that with the same resources and opportunities, you can have a completely different future. And he also showed how much can depend on one right person in one right place. But Burundi doesn't have its own Paul Kagame. They have, for example, this piece of This is Pierre Nkurunziza, and he brought to his country total corruption, instability, and a civil war. More than that, by personal decree, he killed around 2,000 of his political opponents. Pierre himself died just as pointlessly as he governed. The president of Burundi was known for fiercely denying the COVID-19 pandemic and kicking out WHO representatives from the country. And then, a couple of months later, he died of COVID himself. But he wasn't the only one at fault, because the leaders of this country are constantly either dying or getting overthrown by military coups. And while Burundi doesn't have any issues with turnover in leadership, they have huge problems with corruption. Today, Burundi is among the 10 most corrupt countries in the world, and that's because, in a country where the government's reputation is destroyed in the public eye, people's choices lean more and more toward nepotism, not toward institutions like courts or the police. And being unable to solve their own problems, the authorities of Burundi resort to begging for help from other countries. And in that, Burundi's politicians have done very well, because nearly a third of the country's total income comes from donations from other countries, including Russia, of course.
But why does the Russian government need these poor souls?
Lavrov flies out to them and does tribal dances, and the president of Burundi talks personally with Putin, and Putin makes positive comments about the increase in trade turnover between the two countries.
From January to April, trade turnover increased faster than it did last year.
But according to official data, Russia trades with Burundi for around $10 million per year, while Putin's watch from a German manufacturer costs over $1 million. So in the end, Russian people are not paying that much to Burundi.
But why do it at all? What's the point of Putin sitting at the same table with him and pretending he takes them seriously when they never discuss anything serious?
But we have to understand that in the upper ranks of power, no one wastes time. And Russia's strategy, along with other countries in Africa, is a calculated one. Because as studies show, a sudden increase in population inevitably leads to economic growth. And even though today it might seem like these starving people are far from the world's leading economies, a case like China clearly shows us that the distance from a poor country to a global authority can be as short as 20 years. In short, Burundi will get back on its feet. That will inevitably happen, and maybe even sooner than we all think. And honestly, that makes me happy, because in the end, we need to understand a person of any belief, any religion, any skin color has the right to food and safety, and the citizens of Burundi have no access to that right at all, which means these poor people are left with only one thing: to wait, and to hope that one day everything will finally change. By the way, since we mentioned Putin, I've actually got a video on that topic right here on the screen. Love you guys, thank you for watching, please subscribe, and thank you in advance.